But as Ken said, my name is Patrick McGuire. I am the Technology Equity Manager at the City of South Bend, Indiana. So I took the Amtrak this morning. Shout out to Ishmael and the Amtrak team. But just across, just about an hour and a half east in South Bend. So excited to be here with you all talking about some of our work in the city. There we go. So just to give a little bit of background on what my team and my department in the city that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of, what our kind of mandate is and what our structure is. So I am embedded within the Department of Innovation and Technology in South Bend. That's both our kind of IT department, and it's also a department that does a lot of innovative community partnerships and innovative civic programming. So some of those innovative focus areas that we work on are bridging the digital divide. That's one of the big things I'm here to talk about today. We provide public Wi-Fi throughout the city. We partner with local organizations to provide internet to school students locally. We also work with our departments within the city to enhance city services. So whether it's solid waste or 311, which is our city call center, our department offers kind of business planning, process improvement to enhance those services. We also provide open data access. We help manage our open data portal. We do a lot of resident-facing data collection and data transparency efforts. And we also very intentionally partner with and try to uplift the work of community organizations and try to leverage those to best serve our residents. So I've included some links in the slides once they go out that I would strongly encourage folks to explore just a little bit about our department. So one of those partnerships that I briefly mentioned that I'll be talking about a lot today is called Citywide Classroom, which was a partnership that emerged in 2020 to deliver, in sort of the critical moment of distance learning, to deliver hotspots to students in our public school corporation who did not have internet access. So as I've put on the slides, in 2020, we saw that 23.5% of South Bend families didn't have any internet connection. And then of those that did have an internet connection, about 11% relied exclusively on mobile phones. And as many parents, I'm sure, or if you've done kind of work on a mobile connection, it's generally not strong enough to do basic internet functions, but let alone kind of distance learning and Zoom classrooms or Google Meet, which were essential, especially at the start of the pandemic. So when classes went online, the city helped convene partners from the South Bend School Corporation, as well as a local nonprofit NFocus that does innovation projects, to create Citywide Classroom, which helps distribute hotspots to students in the local area. But we also began to see that as the initial grant funding from emergency provisions started to draw down, we were unable to provide unlimited data connections for an extended period of time. So we initially connected over 5,000 students with these unlimited T-Mobile hotspots, and those were a great solution, and they've really made a difference in the community. But we also realized that we needed an ongoing, continued, sustained solution, because even though distance learning may have declined and students are back in the classroom, we've known that the digital divide that we've seen in South Bend with 23% of our families not connected in 2020, that has continued, and the pandemic only exacerbated it, that so many aspects of daily life that were maybe not online to begin with have moved online, and also that this digital divide was already impacting families before the pandemic started. So when we started to see that we were going to be unable to provide unlimited data connections for the foreseeable future due to high recurring costs, the kind of ending of grant periods, we started to look at how can we take one-time funding, invest it into sustainable infrastructure that the community can own and operate, and then provide secure, reliable connections for lower recurring costs for the longer term. One thing I didn't mention but should mention is that we still are able to provide LTE hotspots through T-Mobile's Project 10 Million at no cost to the school district in South Bend, which is a fantastic program, and definitely want to encourage folks in their communities to explore it. But it does only provide 100 gigabytes a year for families, which, as I'll talk about, and as I'm sure you might expect, families run through that data very quickly. So we saw that those hotspots were filling a need, and they were providing a basic internet connection where there previously may not have been one. But then we also saw the need for an enhanced, unlimited, and long-term solution for students. So with this, we looked at private LTE networks and CBRS as a potential solution. I'm sure that, depending on what industries and backgrounds folks have, this is either something that makes very little sense at this point, or it might be something you've heard many times before. But I recently knew nothing, as of a few years ago, knew nothing about telecommunications, the radio spectrum, or any of this vocabulary. So to share a little bit about how it was explained to me, essentially every discrete part of the electromagnetic spectrum on which you can transfer information is regulated by the federal government. And within that spectrum, certain usable parts are what we can transmit for like a 4G, LTE, or 5G network. A lot of it, as you can see, is actually the chart on the far right, is the spectrum allocation chart for the United States. And if you zoom in, every single piece of the allocation is divvied up, and the most valuable parts of the spectrum in some cases are the smallest. So you can zoom into 50 megahertz of the bandwidth, and it will be a very valuable piece of spectrum that costs a lot of money to use for something like an LTE network. However, in 2017, the FCC tried a new innovative approach, which is allocating part of the spectrum, this very valuable, finite, discrete resource that was usable for kind of creating LTE-style networks. And it was previously owned by primarily naval radar systems, and especially in communities like South Bend, where there's not much naval radar activity, the FCC thought that communities could use this as a shared spectrum that communities could hop on, use as they need, and not have to pay billions of dollars to use. As a local government, we did not have the funding necessary to buy the spectrum necessary to do what T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon does, but we did have, in partnership with the school corporation and with local nonprofits, the funds necessary to kind of use the infrastructure necessary to create a CBRS, which is Citizens Broadband Radio Service Private LTE Network. I also want to shout out Notre Dame's Wireless Institute. As you may know, there is a small university near South Bend known as Notre Dame that I'm a very proud alum of, and Notre Dame was a phenomenal partner and is a phenomenal partner through all of this. They actually introduced this solution to us. They walked us through each step of the process. Their members of their wireless team are who explain Spectrum to me, and they continue to explain it to me every day. So we are very grateful and lucky to have had them as a partner in this project. So we knew that we wanted to give an LTE network a shot. We wanted to use it primarily to serve students for distance learning and for kind of bridging the digital divide, as I mentioned previously. The way we decided to structure the network was fundamentally a partnership between our school district, who would take the lead on the project, the city supporting, especially with an infrastructure investment, and then the local nonprofit that I mentioned previously, N-Focus, supporting with project management services. So I should also mention some of that grant funding previously. Our community received funding from Indiana's GEAR grant, which is from CARES funding, and the South Bend Community School Corporation used a significant amount of its remaining funding from that grant program to make this network happen. So we decided to partner after a vendor review with Motorola Solutions for the network implementation. And we also used Cradlepoint R500 routers. So essentially the way this network will work is it's almost like a wireless internet service provider of sorts, where the signal, as you can see from rooftop sites or tower sites, is transmitted throughout certain parts of town. And then we provide families with a router that they just plug into the wall, put antennas on, and then anywhere where it's in the coverage area, it takes in that signal and puts it out as usable Wi-Fi like you'd see from your normal hotspot or from a router. So we decided to leverage our assets among our partnerships. So what I mean by that is we had some tall buildings that we were able to leverage for transmission sites. This is myself on a 4 or 5-story high school in South Bend. You realize once you start doing a project like this, where all the tall buildings are in your city, and you start noticing things like that. And so we decided to put our sites on a tall high school, a middle school tower that we actually had through the school corporation, and then a local tower company partnered with us to help to make one transmission site a tower as well. So this was our initial network design. And as I mentioned, this was using 3 tower sites, the rooftop site at a high school and 2 tower sites, one being from a leased private partner. And then we also have a dark fiber network that provides the backhaul for the solution, which we're also very lucky. They're a nonprofit, great partner in South Bend. And then we would be using 9 CBSDs, which are the CBRS radios, and then 18 antennas, and we expected this to cover a significant amount of South Bend. For those who aren't as familiar with South Bend geography as I am, this is most of the city, and to be able to have the bandwidth to support about 1,000 families. So that's actually one thing I will talk about right now, which is we expected the coverage to be very significant, several miles each, for each tower or rooftop site. But after initial drive tests, we saw that our coverage was significantly tighter. So the pink coverage areas are what we actually saw in South Bend. So just that is a challenge that we had to navigate. And I think especially being here today, as we share our experiences with other communities, we want to be open about what we saw and how we're navigating them so that people have more information going into this process. So when we saw that this coverage was very limited, we decided to, kind of take stock of what students are we covering? Is there a better way we could cover more students with this connectivity? And then, what might be the reason for the reduced coverage? And just a quick note on the reduced coverage. Part of it is that South Bend has a lot of trees and models that might not factor in foliage as significantly as you might for traditional cellular LTE models. It's actually a lot more important for CBRS networking. So this sort of thing, as a new type of solution, our providers and all providers are kind of tinkering and reconfiguring their models. And we were part of the reconfiguration process, but I think we've learned a lot from it. And we're still very glad to have our trees in South Bend. We're trying to plant more. So, but to talk a little bit about where we went from that. So obviously it was a little bit disappointing to see. We expected to cover, most of the city, and now we're covering small neighborhoods. But we also saw that this was a chance to work with Motorola, reconfigure our tower sites and target our investment to most effectively serve the neighborhoods and areas that we wanted to reach. So instead of focusing on broad coverage, we refocused our network design to focus on density, and especially density among the lowest income neighborhoods in South Bend. So Motorola, a great partner in all this, they helped us move tower sites that weren't serving the residents that we wanted to serve. So that tower on the south side, that was at a middle school. As you can see, this map on the right shows our dense areas of low income students. And the tower on the south side of town was not covering basically anyone. So we decided to remove the equipment from that tower site and move it to the dense areas on the northwest side of town. So yes, so yeah, the purple means density on the top one, specifically density of low-income students. And we also are piloting higher power antennas that do a better job of pulling in the signal, that we do expect to increase the coverage radius by about 30%. And again, Motorola has been testing these things with us, and we're definitely treating this as a pilot and treating every lesson as a very valuable learning opportunity that we can share with other communities as well. So we will be distributing more devices in the coming months as our final tower site gets online. But we have distributed 215 routers so far to families. Over half of those routers are actively being used by families. And this was actually a week ago. I expect this number will have gone up, but 53 terabytes of data have been used on the network so far. And if you do some quick math, that means that families are really going beyond their 100 gigabyte annual allotment that they would receive from the free T-Mobile hotspots that we've provided so far. So we are still trying to figure out, what the best way to, get these out in the neighborhoods. We're still trying to learn from residents about their experience on the devices, but we do see that using our online portal, when they have strong signal, strong connectivity, they see speeds of up to 70 megabits per second download and 25 upload, which could always be faster, but especially for a solution like this, that's much better than It's a strong basic connection, and especially when a family may have no connection previously. That's something that we're excited about. And as the city, I also should just mention that I keep saying we and us in this project, and I think it's because we feel so tied together as a community. But I should mention again that most of this is led by our local school corporation. As the city, we offer kind of leadership and project management and then resources as needed. But as part of our contribution investing in the network, we've also made provisions for shared use of the network. So we created a shared use agreement that was actually inspired by the folks in San Antonio. So again, as we learn from cities, we want to share our lessons and recommendations as well. But we have built into the design of the network opportunities for shared use from the city. So we are planning on launching public Wi-Fi sites using the private LTE network. Some of those will include kind of solutions that fiber, which is kind of our gold standard of internet connectivity, can't really reach for different reasons. One example I like to share is there's a temporary housing shelter in South Bend that is planning on moving in potentially the coming months, coming year. It wouldn't really make sense to make a long-term fiber investment at that site because it might change relatively soon. But we can use the private LTE network with some high-powered antennas, as I show on the slide, to potentially provide connectivity there within a matter of weeks. We also are planning on using the network for smart city use cases. So we're looking to pilot our own air quality sensor network in the city. Part of those will use, some of those devices we plan on using private LTE SIM cards. It's just as simple as where you'd normally have a carrier SIM card, you can put a private LTE SIM card in and get online and use this network as well. So I keep saying us and we, but this really is a collaborative partnership, primarily led by our school corporation, but it's hard for me not to feel like we're all in this together as a community. So a few recommendations and lessons that I would love to share with anyone who's interested in a private LTE solution, especially as a means to bridge the digital divide in your communities. I think we would not have made the progress that we've made, and we wouldn't have even discovered this solution if it weren't for the experience and expertise in our community. We're very fortunate to have Notre Dame as a research and institutional partner, but I know that there are partners throughout the country. There are different working groups. I would love to connect folks if you're interested with some of these organizations that offer some of this research insight. But I think leaning on whether it's cities, universities, organizations that are familiar with this work, I think that's truly invaluable. Also, just emphasizing that we had to refocus on density. That is a key lesson we've learned, and that I think starting with density is the way to go, knowing that you may not have the broadest coverage possible. leveraging your assets, kind of like our tall buildings and towers we may have use of, saves you a lot of money in the long run and makes things a little bit easier with permitting. And then treat this as a pilot, expect the unexpected, and I think treat everything as a lesson that you can continue to learn and grow from. But this has definitely been a pilot that we've already seen a lot of impact on, and we're excited to share the use case in South Bend and hopefully inspire some additional projects out there. So thank you, and please feel free to reach out or catch me in the foyer afterwards. Very happy to chat about our experiences.